So as I mentioned, I want to talk about finding fulfilment today, but I'm going to begin with the passage from Matthew that we read a little bit earlier. If you look at Matthew chapter 21 in the New King James, you will often find the headings of each of the individual stories. Whilst it makes it very convenient to look through the word and see all of these headings, the tendency is to kind of chop it up into bits, and you don't really get a sense of the flow and connection here just by looking at those headings. The gospel, indeed the whole of the Bible, is not a series of disconnected stories, and it's not just written in chronological order. The way we process history these days, we like to get the timing right. This happened, then that happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. And it's very important to us to get the order that things occurred. And so we tend to look at the Bible in this way, that it ought to be in chronological order, but that's to miss the point. There is a flow and there is a connection through all of these stories. And that's something we must hang on to when we look at the Word, any part of the Word. There's a progression we need to be looking for. So when we come to that story around about the middle where we started today with the withering of the fig tree, we have to understand there's a connection with that story to what goes before and what follows. Now, one of the obvious connections is fruit. Now, Jesus, when he talks about it and talks to the disciples about the withering of the fig tree, he really doesn't give you much of a sense of that, other than he talks about what we might call the fruit of faith or the results of faith. But as we go on through the chapter, then we have other stories of fruit. So the authorities question Jesus' right to do and say what he is doing, and then he tells them a story, and the story occurs in a vineyard. And then he goes beyond that, past where we finished reading today, to another story of a vineyard. And so there's this connection, at least in a literal sense, of fruit through this chapter. And finally, at the very end of the verse, at the very end of the chapter, you get these words where the chief priests and the Pharisees realize that Jesus is talking about them. And so we look at the whole of that chapter 21, from the entry into Jerusalem, the clearing of the temple, onto the story of the fig tree, onto this confrontation with the chief priests and the Pharisees, onto the two parables that follow. And that central story of the withering of the fig tree is commentary upon the spiritual state of those people that Jesus is confronting because they have confronted him. You know, if only they had paid attention actually to what he had to say to them, rather than seeking to dismiss and destroy, which seems to be their constant desire. The fig and the vine. Why the fig and the vine? Well, if we look at Swedenborg's work, he writes this: the vine is used in the word to signify spiritual good, and the fig tree, natural good. So the fig is all about our natural actions, what we do externally. They're the things that we can see, that we can observe, that we can measure. And this is what the chief priests and the Pharisees were doing in spades. They were doing a great deal of natural good. The vine, however, is spiritual good. This is the intelligence and the love that lies behind what we do. And if natural good is lacking, where we need to look to find out why is spiritual good. It's what is within. So, what does any of this have to do with finding fulfilment? Well, as I said, Jesus' authority was questioned by the chief priests and the Pharisees. And the thing is, they saw Jesus as a troublemaker. Here's this man come along and he's disturbing the status quo. He's making things difficult for us. But the thing is that Jesus was not saying anything new. He was not saying anything that wasn't actually taking place at that moment. He's merely laying it out and saying, this is what you are like if you look within. He's exposing the flaws of the system rather than inventing something just to stir up trouble. We have a story in the Old Testament, something similar. The prophet Elijah appears one day before Ahab, and Ahab says, "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" And Elijah's response is, "Well, I'm not the one causing the trouble. I'm just here to show you what's going on." And this is a hard lesson for us to learn. When we talk about fulfilment, what we have to understand is that what is in the heart is already fulfilled. And if we don't like the results that we are seeing, we have to look deeper to find the reason for them. On Thursday at question time, I was sitting and chatting with someone, and they made this rather interesting comment. There is a difference between loving to do God's will and loving the idea of doing God's will. You see, we are a mess of contradictory loves. There's what we say we love to do and what we say rules us, but then there's what actually rules us. And they are oftentimes different things. And our challenge is to bring that mess of loves into alignment with what is good. Because once we are able to do that, then the love we say we love will be fulfilled. So if you look at your life with dissatisfaction now, you know where the problem lies. It's a challenge. It's a great challenge for us. I just want to think about the idea of success and what success means. Like loving to do God's will, we are attracted to the idea of success. We are attracted to what we see as the effects of being successful. However, what we're less attracted to is what success requires. We're less attracted to the hard work, to the dedication, to the single-minded pursuit of an ideal. These are things which are much less palatable to us. And here's the thing, in talking about success, we can quite happily go on and rattle on about success and this person is successful and so on, but we forget the ideal to which they have dedicated themselves that makes them successful. You see, it's that dedication to an ideal which creates that success. So how do you find fulfillment? How do you find success? Well, the first thing is you go looking for a purpose bigger than yourself. You find a principle you can dedicate your life to. And then you have to put aside all of the distractions of modern life, and aren't there many distractions? Many more, I think, even today than there were 10, 15, 20 years ago and beyond. We have so many things that entertain and essentially distract us from living the life that we aspire to. And then we also even have to put aside the ideas of fulfillment and success themselves, because they too can become a distraction. We need to be of use. And that's really all we need to focus on, to be of use, to work single-mindedly towards a goal and make that the focus of everything that we do. I can attest to that in myself, in my own life. It's been those times where I have shut out all of the other stuff going on around me, all of the what people think of me and am I doing a good job, and just focus on doing the best job that I'm capable of doing here and now. When I've been able to do that, then I start noticing people saying, oh, that's very good, or it's very successful, or isn't that marvellous? I get positive feedback from it. But when I spend my time worrying about what people think of me, worrying of, am I doing a good job? Am I fulfilling? Am I being successful? That's when things start to fall apart. So I need to put those ideas aside and concentrate on just doing the job. One of the things that's always frustrated me about education in the however many years it is since I started teaching is the focus on testing and reporting. Because when we get all consumed about testing and reporting, it can be about, for the child concerned, it can be about, am I the best? Am I number one? Because in a class of children there will always only be one number one. It can even get to the point where schools get caught up in this, and a school feels like it needs to be the best of all of the other schools. But in reality, testing and reporting is about one thing. It's about education. It's actually about teaching children to learn what they need for life. And that is the only thing that testing and reporting should be about. But we've made it about so much more. And you know, when we make a mistake, don't we torture ourselves? Oh, I've made a mistake, that's a dreadful thing. But the thing is, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to get better at what I'm doing. So, for the year ahead, I would suggest that we each, in every endeavour, set aside our desire and our need for success and fulfilment, and actually just get on with the job of being of use. Because when we dedicate ourselves to being of use and fulfilling a purpose greater than ourselves, that is when we find success and fulfilment and happiness.